Who's actually going to get the most out of a big guillotine paper trimmer? And who would be better off putting their money somewhere else? If you're the kind of person who spends a few hours a week cutting up printouts, cutting cardstock for crafts, or prepping a batch of signage for a local event, this might feel like a real time saver. On the other hand, if you only need to trim a couple of pages once a month, the price and the footprint could end up feeling like a waste. And for the everyday buyer who's wondering whether the premium tag is justified, the answer hinges on how much you value speed, safety, and consistent edge quality. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's start by putting the Dahle 580 into the context of a typical small office or home studio workflow. Imagine you're a freelance graphic designer who prints proofs on 24 by 36-inch sheets and needs each piece trimmed to exact dimensions before sending them to a client. Without a guillotine, you're either fighting with a ruler and a craft knife risking uneven cuts and a sore hand, or you're outsourcing the trim, which adds both cost and turnaround time. The Dahle 580's 32-inch cutting length means you can handle those standard poster sheets in one go, and the 30-sheet capacity lets you load a whole batch, trim, then unload without constantly refilling the tray. For someone who does this kind of work daily, the time saved quickly outweighs the initial outlay. Now picture a high school teacher prepping worksheets for a class of 30. She prints double-sided handouts on standard 8.511 paper, stacks them, and needs each stack trimmed to a uniform edge so the pages look professional. The acrylic safety shield on this model is a small but meaningful detail. Kids can reach in to pull a sheet without worrying about the blade snapping at their fingertips. The shield also keeps the blade covered when the machine isn't in use, which is a plus for a classroom that's constantly being shuffled around. In that scenario, the trimmer's sturdy metal base prevents wobble, so the teacher can trust that each cut will be straight, even if the desk isn't perfectly level. What about the hobbyist who loves scrapbooking or card making? Those projects often involve cutting multiple sheets of slightly heavier cardstock, sometimes with decorative edges. The German steel blade on the Dahle 580 is ground to a razor-sharp edge, and the self-sharpening feature means you won't notice a dull blade after a few dozen cuts. That translates to clean, crisp edges on each cardstock piece, which is something you can't easily achieve with a rotary cutter or a cheap hand blade. The fact that the blade stays firmly in place, no wobbling or accidental drops, helps when you're working with delicate materials that can tear if the cut isn't clean. But the same strengths can also become drawbacks, depending on your situation. The first thing many people notice is the size. The stand and base together take up a good chunk of floor space, roughly the size of a small dining table. If you're living in a cramped apartment or share a desk with a printer and a computer, finding a permanent spot for the trimmer can be a challenge. It's not a piece you can easily tuck under a shelf. You'll need a dedicated area, and moving it later isn't exactly a lightweight affair. For a casual user who only needs occasional trimming, that footprint alone might be enough reason to skip it. Another practical consideration is the material limitation. The 32-inch length is generous, but the blade is designed primarily for standard paper weights up to about 200 GSM. If you regularly cut through thick cardboard, chipboard, or multiple layers of heavy cardstock, you'll start to feel the strain. The blade will still cut, but you may need to make multiple passes, which defeats the speed advantage that the trimmer promises. Users who work in signage shops or print houses that handle heavy stock might find a more industrial-grade cutter a better match. Price is a factor that pops up in almost every review thread for premium trimmers. The Dahle 580 sits in a higher price bracket compared with entry-level rotary cutters or basic guillotines. The justification lies in the self-sharpening blade, the safety shield, and that solid metal base that won't warp over time. Over the long run, you won't have to replace the blade or worry about the base sagging, which can happen with cheaper models. If you calculate the cost per cut over a year of daily use, the numbers start to look reasonable. However, for someone who only trims once a month, that amortization takes years, and the upfront cost feels less defensible. Looking at the community feedback, the overall rating hovers around 4.3 stars out of 5 from over 4,000 reviewers. While we don't have individual comments to quote, that rating suggests that the majority of owners are satisfied, likely because the trimmer delivers on the promises that matter most. A clean cut every time, a blade that stays sharp without extra maintenance, and a safety mechanism that actually works.